G'day, this is Brian Medway from Crosslink Christian Network, and this is number 3, Combat Ready number 3, 3.1. And the reason it's 3.1 and 2.1 and 1.1 is I'm hoping to have 3.2 and 2.2 with all that. That's really important for you to know. But I'm going to talk about Combat Ready because last year at the conference, somebody prophesied over me in the presence of everybody that was there and said that we were to go into a time where we would need to be combat ready, to be able to win battles. We'd become an army, and we'd been successful in providing a place of safety. We'd been successful in providing a sense of identity, but we'd not become successful yet in winning battles. And I totally agree with that. But in order to understand this prophetic word, I didn't understand what it meant. I knew about battles, of course, but most of the teaching that I'd seen or heard or observed over the years about spiritual warfare was really wacky. People doing little religious exercises of putting on this armour and thinking that if you do that, then somehow you're equipped. No, I don't think so. Well, and the reason I don't think so is not because, I have that opinion. I'm saying Jesus never did that. Paul never did that. Jesus never got up on a day and said, "Right, guys, let's put the armor on, belt of truth, breastplate of righteousness." Nah, sorry. If that offends you, I don't mean to offend you. I probably that does sound a bit offensive, but I'm just not satisfied, and I think it's really inept of people to think that somehow that's what Paul wrote that for. No way. Paul wrote this in Ephesians 6. Finally be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might, put on the full armour of God. He wrote it because people were capable of not doing that. They were capable of living days and weeks and months without fighting battles according to the weapons that God had ordained. And these are weapons that are mighty to the pulling down of strongholds we read about in 2 Corinthians 10. So who wants to use a weapon where it depends on how well we can argue, how we can use our position or our abilities to intimidate people or to control or manipulate people, or we can gather people to support us and against the people who we're opposed to, and we can say we're better than you or we're more right than you or whatever else. That's really crazy stuff. And so these weapons are not designed to fight against flesh and blood. They're not designed for a debate. They're not designed for an argument. They're not designed for a vote. They're designed to disarm and bring to nothing the spiritual powers that are influencing people to represent purposes that are against the will of God. And so that's why in our way of thinking about battles, we don't do battles in the way that other people do. And that's exactly what Paul said, by the way, in 2 Corinthians 10. He said, if you think we're to come down, there's some rubbish going on in Corinth, right? Paul's maybe in Ephesus or somewhere there. And so he's writing, or maybe he's in Macedonia. He's writing to them saying, we're coming down there. But if you think we're coming down there to see who's on our side and who's on the other side, and who's going to argue the best argument, and who's going to outwit each other, and who's going to outbully each other, we don't do things like that. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they are mighty to the pulling down of strongholds. And strongholds are the things that are affecting people who are locked up. And so very often the reason why we have enemies in terms of people kind of enemies is because they've been locked up by something the devil has convinced them about, and they're being destructive and all this kind of stuff, and they didn't even realize that it's the enemy who's doing this. Like in the parable that Jesus taught about the wheat and the weeds, the enemy did this. The enemy did this. And so the enemy has created that havoc that people are wreaking, the addictions, the horrible things that people do to each other. This is the enemy. So what happens if we have weapons to disempower the enemy? Now there's something really amazing. What if these weapons of warfare, the 7 of them that are spoken about in Ephesians 6, are not designed to win an argument or win a debate or just prove that I'm right and you're wrong, but are going to launch themselves. They're going to go right over the top of, sorry, that's my hand. Looks really weird, doesn't it? Right over the top of where people are, and it's going to destroy what empowers the enemy. Like, here's a really bad example. What if you have a battlefield and you have you there, the enemy there, and the enemy has firepower from planes that are taking off from a few airports. And so they're dropping bombs everywhere, so you can't fight the enemy. Okay, what if you have rockets that destroy the airstrips and the bombs and the planes, so there's no more planes anymore? Well, it means that the whole battlefield has changed. And now, that's not even an adequate illustration for what I'm talking about. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they are mighty to the pulling down of strongholds. And when the stronghold gets pulled down, the truth can be seen. When the stronghold gets pulled down, people are able to have an opportunity to be redeemed, to change, to be transformed. Satan hasn't blinded their eyes anymore. And this is how it goes. And so we can do that. That's what these weapons, that's why I'm excited about this. That's why I'm trying to learn as best I can how to do this, because I have a lot of battles to fight. And I want to win those battles. But I want to win by seeing people who are doing stupid stuff stop doing stupid stuff. Not because I've manipulated them, but because they've been set free. See, that's the battle. This is an amazing battle. And we have the opportunity of fighting in this battle. And so that's why here's my assumption. And it's the method that I want to talk to you about today. The method of answering the question, what are those weapons about? Forget about which part of the armour they make up in a Roman soldier and all that kind of stuff. Just think about the weapons as they were used by Jesus, as they were used by the apostles. And then we'll have a better understanding of what he means when he says the truth, righteousness, the gospel of peace, faith, salvation, the word of God and prayer, how these things work. We've got a whole bunch of books, a whole bunch of stories that give us an idea of how to fight that battle and give us a definition. Let those stories, let those experiences of Jesus and the apostles, let those experiences define for us what these weapons are like. So no easy answer, not just my opinion against somebody else's, but I want to look to the ministry of Jesus for the definition of what those mean and how they work. Because what we have with Jesus is a record of a whole bunch of things that he did and said. All kinds of circumstances. What we have in the Acts of the Apostles are 28 chapters, a whole bunch of stories, maybe 100 or so stories of apostles engaged in spiritual warfare. And this was, we don't sort of, you can't see, they don't say, now we're going to engage in spiritual warfare. That's another really silly thing. I'm sorry to be digressing here. But you see, people say, let's go and do spiritual warfare. Oh, we should be doing that all the time. So how do we stop doing spiritual warfare and start doing spiritual warfare? Well, we're either doing spiritual warfare by who we are, the way we live, what we do and how we do it, or we're not. We don't get a choice. We are engaged in a battle without our choosing. If you wake up in the morning, start and you're breathing and your eyes are opening and closing, you've got a pulse, you're in a battle. And you're going to fight in that battle, good or bad, regardless of whether you choose to do this or choose to do that. And so the question is not, are we going to fight in the battle? The question is, how are we fighting in the battle and how successful are we? And I want to learn that by being a follower of Jesus and a witness of the apostles. Why don't you join me in the coming sessions in this series?